They left her to die on the rails, to humiliate her father and forever deprive him of hope. The greedy and cruel hawk was confident in his triumph, but the unexpected appearance of a stranger changed everything, turning his plan into a catastrophe. Can one man challenge a gang to save an innocent soul? Don't miss this story to the end. It will not only shock you with its ending, but also give you wisdom comparable to a valuable life lesson. Subscribe and like so you don't lose this captivating story of the Wild West. Caleb O'Connell. He was unlike the other inhabitants of Canyon Creek, this town lost in the Arizona mountains. While other cowboys chased after herds and a quick drink, Caleb preferred calm and solitude. He was a man whose face bore scars left not by bullets, but by years of hard work in old silver mines. Thin, but wiry, with sun-faded blue eyes, he wore a worn-out hat that seemed to be his only true friend. He was 30, but looked 45. Caleb was a stranger who came here not to find gold, but to find oblivion from a past that haunted him like a shadow. He lived in a small hut on the outskirts of the town, mending harnesses and occasionally taking orders to escort goods. The locals looked at him with caution and curiosity, but he always kept to himself. It was an early morning in 1880. The air was cool, and the sun was just beginning to paint the sky in fiery orange tones. He was sitting on the porch of his hut, sipping bitter coffee, when a deep locomotive whistle sounded in the distance. It was the Old Devil, a cursed locomotive that, as they said, brought bad luck, but regularly delivered goods and passengers to Canyon Creek. But today the whistle was not as usual. There was a panic in it, as if the locomotive was trying to warn about something that only it could see. Caleb, accustomed to a measured life, raised his head and saw something that made his heart clench. In the distance, on the only railway line that ran through the canyon, lay a young woman. Her long, dark hair was spread out on the sleepers, and her brown dress blended in with the color of the earth. She lay motionless, as if sleeping, but Caleb knew that it wasn't a dream. The Old Devil was already gaining speed on the flat section, and there were only a few minutes left until it reached her. At that moment, another silhouette appeared on the horizon, a rider in a sombrero, who seemed to be rushing directly towards the woman, but not to help. There was a kind of wild, cruel determination in his movement. Caleb couldn't make out his face, but just the sight of him sent a chill down his spine. This was not a savior, but, most likely, the one who left the girl there. A wave of compassion rose in Caleb's chest. He hated injustice more than anything in the world, and what he saw was its flagrant manifestation. He instantly jumped to his feet, leaving his unfinished coffee. His old horse, named Bullet, was tied up near the hut. Caleb, without losing a second, jumped into the saddle. He had no time to think, no time for fear. He had to save her. As he galloped, the wind whistled in his ears, and his heart beat in time with Bullet's hooves. He felt that every second counted. With every meter, he saw the approaching locomotive, its black smoke coaling in the blue sky. Finally, he could make out the girl. Her face, so young and beautiful, was calm, but there were bruises around her eyes, and her lips were bitten. She had a turquoise necklace around her neck, which indicated her Native American origin. A Comanche Indian. He knew this, as he had worked on their lands before. This added even more pain to his heart. White people were often cruel to Native Americans, and Caleb had witnessed many such atrocities. He knew that this girl was not just a victim of circumstances, she was a victim of someone's cruelty. Caleb rode Bullet like never before. The distance to the girl was shortening, but the locomotive was also getting closer. He saw her slowly opening her eyes. Her gaze was blurry and frightened. "Save me from these rails, and I will be yours forever," she whispered. Her voice was weak, but there was a desperate plea in it. There was no gratitude in her eyes, only animal fear and a determination to survive. This phrase, uttered against the background of the rising roar of the locomotive, was for Caleb not just a request, but a kind of oath that instantly bound their destinies. He jumped off his horse at full gallop, without thinking about the consequences. Bullet, obeying his command, stopped, and Caleb, with one jump, was next to the girl. He grabbed her shoulders and began to pull her off the rails. She was surprisingly light, like a feather. He felt the intense heat from the approaching locomotive, and the whistle made his ears ring. One more pull, and he dragged her to the side. At the very last moment, when the locomotive rushed past, leaving behind a cloud of steam and a rumble that shook the ground, they both fell into the roadside dust, breathing heavily. The girl was in shock, but alive. Caleb lay beside her, his heart pounding like crazy. He had saved her, But what now? He got up, looked around, searching for the rider, but he had disappeared like a ghost. Caleb knew that their meeting was not accidental. This girl was in big trouble, and he, without realizing it, had become part of her story. He carefully helped her up. Her body was weak and trembling. She was beautiful, despite the bruises and face stained with dust. Her eyes, full of fear, now looked at him with a new, wary gratitude. Her turquoise necklace was a symbol of her tribe band, possibly her social status. Caleb noticed that she had a bracelet on her wrist with a symbolism that was familiar to him from stories about the Comanches. It was a sign of a powerful chief. This meant that she was the daughter or wife of a chief, and therefore, her abduction was not just a crime, but a reason for war. Caleb realized that he was involved in something much bigger than just saving a girl. By saving her from the rails, he had signed his own death warrant, getting involved in a conflict that could cost him his life. But he didn't regret it. At that moment, looking at her, he felt that he had done something right and important, that for the first time in many years his life had gained some meaning. The girl he had saved introduced herself. Her name was Lonnie. "I am Lonnie, the daughter of Chief White Bear," she whispered. And there was no longer fear in her voice, only pride. He felt the tension that had been holding him back all these years begin to ease. There was a promise in her words, but he didn't know yet what price he would have to pay for it. Caleb took her hand to help her up, and felt something he had long buried awaken in his body. It was the desire to protect, to fight, to live. He realized that their paths were now inextricably linked. He had to find out who left her on the rails and why, and who that rider was. It was not simple curiosity, but an instinct that told him that this man would not stop until he got what he wanted. Caleb understood that leaving her here was dangerous. The town of Canyon Creek was full of ill-wishers and scalp hunters. Lonnie was too valuable a prey. He decided to take her to his hut so that she could rest and recover. On the way, he tried to question her, but she only squeezed his hand and remained silent. Her eyes were full of pain, and her lips were tightly sealed. He understood that she needed time to recover and start talking. They reached his hut. She went inside and, looking around, sat down on the only bed. Caleb brought her water and food, but she refused. He sat opposite her, watching as she studied every corner of his home. "You are not like other white men," she finally said. "You saved me." Why? Caleb didn't know what to answer. He just shrugged. It had to be done. He couldn't explain that in her eyes he saw his own pain and loneliness. He saw something in her that he had long lost, hope. At that moment, he heard the neighing of a horse outside. He looked out and saw Sheriff Adams, a tall, stately man with a long mustache and a gaze that pierced right through you, riding up to his hut. The sheriff was known for his cruelty and for always catering to wealthy landowners. Next to him was a man Caleb recognized immediately. It was Jeremy Hawk, the local banker, who always looked at him with contempt. Hawk was a greedy and cunning man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. "Caleb, I heard you saved an Indian girl," the sheriff said. His voice was harsh and commanding. "Hawk claims she is his property. Hand her over to us, and we'll forget about your involvement." Caleb stood up, placing his hand on the hilt of his old but reliable revolver. He knew he couldn't stand up to both of them, but he couldn't just hand Lonnie over. He had already made a decision. This was his battle. "She is not a thing, Sheriff. She is a person, and I will not hand her over," Caleb said firmly. Hawk laughed. "You're a fool, Caleb. This Comanche girl is worth a fortune. Her father is the richest chief in these lands, and he is willing to give anything to get her back." He walked closer to the hut, his eyes burning with greed. "Hand her over, and I'll share with you. Together we'll be rich." Caleb shook his head. "Her freedom is not for sale. Her life is not an item for trade." The sheriff pulled out his revolver and pointed it at Caleb. "Last chance, Caleb. Don't be a fool." Caleb also pulled out his revolver. He wasn't going to shoot, but he had to show that he was ready to fight for Lonnie. At that moment, he felt Lonnie come out of the hut and stand beside him. She looked directly at the sheriff and Hawk, and in her eyes there was not hatred, but contempt. "You won't get me," she said, in clear English. The sheriff was shocked. He didn't expect her to speak. Hawk turned pale. His plan, it seemed, had gone awry. He wanted to take her and sell her to her father to get a ransom, but now that she stood next to Caleb, his plan was falling apart. "She's mine," Hawk snarled, and madness appeared in his eyes. He wasn't going to give up. He realized that Caleb had not just saved her, he had become her protector. and that was dangerous for his plans. The sheriff, assessing the situation, decided that the best solution would be to retreat. He knew that Hawk was ready for anything, but he didn't want to get involved in a conflict with the Comanches. "We'll be back, Caleb," the sheriff said, putting away his revolver. "And then you'll regret your decision." They turned around and rode away. Caleb and Lonnie were left alone. Now they were both in danger. Their destinies were inextricably linked. He had saved her, and now she was his responsibility, and he was her protector. But he knew that Hawk would not leave them alone. They had to run. "We have to get out of here," Caleb said. "They'll be back, and they'll be ready for anything." Lonnie looked at him and nodded. There was a new emotion in her eyes, not fear, but hope. She believed that Caleb could protect her, and he believed that he could, if not for his own sake, then for hers. The smell of gunpowder and old hay, mixed with the aroma of flowering cactus, became for Caleb and Lonnie the new, disturbing smell of their life together. After Sheriff Adams and Jeremy Hawk had left, leaving behind only a cloud of dust and threats, Caleb quickly gathered the most necessary things: a few crackers, a flask of water, bullets for his revolver, and a warm blanket. Bullet, his faithful horse, seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation, restlessly shifting from foot to foot. Lonnie, in turn, showed an amazing strength of spirit. She, who had recently been lying on the rails, now held tightly to Caleb while he helped her get on Bullet. Her fragile fingers dug into his leather jacket, and he felt her hope pass to him. It was not a naive belief in a savior, but the hope of a person who had survived the worst and was now clinging to any opportunity to live. "Where are we going?" she asked. Her voice was low and warm, like a summer wind. "To the river. There we can get away from the pursuit if they decide to chase us." "No one knows these lands better than me," Caleb answered. His voice was firm. He was not lying. Years of wandering through these lands had made him the best guide. The sun was setting, and the sky was burning red and purple when they left the town. Caleb did not look back. He knew that every step, every moment was important. Behind them, somewhere in the distance, they could hear the barking of dogs and the shouts of people. Hawk was not going to give up. He was too greedy to let go of such a jackpot. When night fell, they were already deep in the canyon. Caleb knew every path, every stream. He led them through narrow crevices, where the echo of their voices was lost in the silence. Lonnie, who was silent at first, began to open up to him. She said that she was kidnapped from a Comanche camp. The kidnapping was planned by Hawk. He knew that Lonnie was the chief's daughter, and that her father was ready to do anything to get her back. Lonnie didn't know exactly how Hawk managed to negotiate with her kidnappers, but she knew that he wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. "He wanted to get me and sell me to my father," she said. "He thinks my necklace is the key to my tribe's wealth, but he doesn't know that's not true. He just wants to humiliate my father and show his power." "What about that rider?" Caleb asked, remembering the image he had seen in the morning. "That was Hawk," Lonnie answered, and her voice trembled with anger. "He brought me to the rails himself. He wanted my body to be found, so that my father would think that I had died. It would be a humiliation for him that he would never forget, and he wouldn't be able to buy me back." Caleb was shocked. He understood that Hawk was greedy, but not to the extent of committing such a cold-blooded crime. This was an act that went beyond simple greed. There was some kind of personal, perverted revenge in it. Caleb felt his compassion for Lonnie grow into hope for justice. He had to not just save her, he had to help her return to her tribe. It would be not only a victory for her, but also a defeat for Hawk. The next day they reached the river. Caleb knew that here they were safe. No one but him knew this place. They stopped at a small waterfall, where Caleb lit a small fire to warm themselves. Lonnie looked at the fire, and the flames were reflected in her eyes. She was like a wild animal that had finally found a safe place. "Are you not afraid of me?" Caleb asked. Lonnie shook her head. "I know you're a good man. I saw it in your eyes when you saved me. You didn't want anything in return. You just did what had to be done. My father says that people like you are rare flowers in the desert." Her words warmed his heart. He had never heard such words from anyone, especially from a woman. His past was too dark for anyone to see anything good in him. He was a loner, and now he realized that his loneliness was not a choice, but a punishment. And now, thanks to Lonnie, he began to feel that he could be worthy of something more. The hope they had found was fragile, like a cobweb, but it was there. Lonnie told him about her tribe, about her father, Chief White Bear. He was a wise and just man, but cruel when it came to his family and honor. "He will do everything to find me," she said, "and he will punish those who hurt me." She didn't know that Hawk was so reckless that he decided to kidnap her. She knew that her father would do everything to get her back, but she didn't know that he was so close. Their calm was broken when they heard a distant whistle. It was not the old devil, but another locomotive, which, as a rule, ran on distant tracks, but for some reason turned out to be so close. Caleb tensed up. He knew that this locomotive was not just a train, it was a vehicle that carried people and cargo. But at that moment he felt that this train was carrying something that could destroy their fragile hope. He went to the edge of the canyon and looked down. He saw a group of people moving along a narrow path leading to the railroad. They didn't look like ordinary travelers. They were armed and moved fast. Caleb recognized them. They were Hawk's men. He realized that Hawk, not trusting the sheriff, had sent his own group to find and kill them. He quickly returned to Lonnie. "We have to go. They're coming for us," he said. His voice was tense. Lonnie nodded. She understood that their hope could be destroyed at any moment, but she didn't give up. "I'll go with you," she said. "I won't leave you. You saved me, and I won't let them harm you." He helped her get on bullet again. They rode along the river, trying to get away from the pursuit. But Hawk's men were closer than he thought. They heard gunshots, and Caleb realized that they would have to run. He turned his horse towards an abandoned mine that was a few miles away. He knew that there they could hide and, perhaps, fight back. When they reached the mine, it was already dark. Caleb quickly went inside. Lonnie followed him. He found an old lantern and lit it. It was dark and damp inside. He knew they were trapped, but he had a plan. He knew that Hawk would not risk his men by going into the mine. He would wait for them outside. Caleb decided that they would spend the night here, and in the morning they would try to escape. But he was wrong. Hawk was not going to wait. A few minutes after they entered the mine, they heard the entrance to the mine collapse. They were locked in. He heard Hawk's shouts, "I know you're in there. You won't be able to get out. You're finished, Caleb." At that moment, Lonnie grabbed his hand. Her eyes were full of horror. "We won't be able to get out," she whispered. Caleb was in a panic, but he couldn't give up. He was her only hope. He had to find a way out. He began to look for old mine maps, which, as he knew, were hidden in one of the boxes. He found them, and, to his surprise, saw that the map marked a spare exit that led to the old railroad. "We're not trapped. We have a chance," he said to Lonnie. His voice was full of hope. They began to move through the mine, following the directions on the map. But the path was not easy. They faced collapses, traps that were set by Hawk, but they kept going. They knew that their lives depended on their determination. Soon they heard a rumble. It was the old devil, which seemed to be waiting for them on purpose. It was on a spare track, and Hawk, apparently, knew about it. He wanted them to be trapped when the locomotive passed by, and so that they couldn't get out. Caleb realized that they had to hurry. They had to get out before the locomotive passed by. He saw light at the end of the tunnel. It was the exit. They started running faster, but Lonnie, exhausted, fell. "I can't," she whispered. "Leave me. You have to save yourself." Caleb couldn't do that. He picked her up in his arms and ran, ignoring the pain in his body. He knew that he had to save her. It was his only purpose in life. He carried her, like a treasure, through the debris and dust, until they were at the exit. They got out, and at that moment, the old devil rushed past them. Hawk, standing on top of the mountain, looked at them with madness in his eyes. He couldn't believe that they had survived, that their escape was short-lived. Hawk, full of horror and rage, sent his gang after them. He wasn't going to retreat. They broke out of the outer darkness of the mine, barely escaping being hit by the wheels of the old devil. But their brief relief was immediately torn to pieces. At the edge of the canyon, like predators waiting for their prey, Hawk's gang was waiting for them. The moon, full and cold, illuminated their faces, turning them into creepy masks of hatred and greed. "Thought you'd escape, Caleb?" Hawk shouted. His voice was filled with malice. He was sitting on a black horse, his silhouette blending with the shadow. "That girl is mine. She's my only hope for wealth. You'll never be able to keep her. She will be mine. And you will lie in this dust, just as I wanted her to lie." Caleb felt his heart sink. They were trapped. He was holding Lonnie. Her body was trembling with fear. For a moment he felt horror grip him. He wasn't afraid of death, but he was afraid for her. He had saved her from one evil, only to hand her over to another. Hawk's gang surrounded them. Caleb knew that their chances of salvation were nil. He had one revolver and a few bullets. They had rifles, revolvers, and a numerical advantage. He pressed Lonnie to him. His hand was on the hilt of his revolver. He knew that he had to fight, but he couldn't fight against everyone. "Give her to me, Caleb. I promise your death will be quick," Hawk said, pulling out his revolver. Lonnie, gathering her last strength, looked at him. "Don't do this, Caleb. I don't want you to die because of me." Caleb shook his head. "I won't give you to them. I saved you, and I will fight for you until my last breath." He fired. The bullet, whistling through the air, hit the lantern that one of Hawk's men was carrying. The lantern exploded, and a fire broke out in the darkness, which quickly began to spread through the dry grass. In a matter of seconds, the fire engulfed the entire canyon, turning it into hell. The screams of Hawk's men, screams of horror, were mixed with the roar of the fire. In the chaos and panic, Caleb grabbed Lonnie's hand and ran. He knew they had to run towards the river. It was their only chance. They ran, and behind them, like wild animals, Hawk's gang was chasing them, and their screams were drowned out by the roar of the fire. Lonnie was fast, but her strength was at its limit. She stumbled and fell. Caleb picked her up in his arms and ran, ignoring the pain in his body. He knew that he had to reach the river before they were caught. When they reached the river, they were exhausted, but alive. They swam across the river and, getting out on the other bank, fell to the ground, breathing heavily. Caleb was wounded in the shoulder. Blood was flowing down his arm. He pressed the wound, but he knew that he needed to get help urgently. "You're wounded," Lonnie whispered. Her eyes were full of tears. "It's all because of me." "Don't say that," Caleb said. "This is my battle. I chose it when I saved you." But their calm was short-lived. On the other side of the river, through the clouds of smoke from the fire, they saw Hawk. He was alone, but anger burned in his eyes. He was obsessed with revenge. He had lost his men, his chance for wealth, and now he was ready to kill Caleb and Lonnie, even if it was the last thing he would do. "You took everything from me, Caleb. Now I will take what you love most," Hawk shouted. He fired. The bullet, whistling through the air, barely missed Lonnie. Caleb shielded her with his body. At that moment he knew that he had to kill Hawk. He couldn't risk her life. He was ready to do anything to save her. He pulled out his revolver, took aim and fired. Hawk fell. His screams were drowned out by the sound of the shot. Caleb and Lonnie were safe, but they were alone, in the desert, with a wounded Caleb. They knew that they had to find help, and they knew that their path would be long and dangerous. But they were together, and that was the most important thing. They sat by the river, exhausted and dirty, but alive. Jeremy Hawk was dead, but his death did not bring the relief that Caleb had expected. His hands were trembling, and the wound on his shoulder was throbbing. He felt empty. He had saved Lonnie, but at what cost? Lonnie came up to him. Her eyes were full of tenderness and compassion. "Let me see your wound," she said. She carefully took off his jacket and examined the wound. It was deep, but not fatal. She took out herbs and bandages from her bag, which, as she explained, she always carried with her. She washed the wound with water and put on a bandage. Her touches were gentle and warm, and Caleb felt the pain recede. "Thank you," he whispered. "It's me who should be thanking you," she replied. "You saved me from death. You killed a man to protect me. I saw in your eyes that you didn't want to do it. You are a good man, Caleb." Her words were like a balm for him. He never thought that anyone could see anything good in him. He had always considered himself a loner, but now, looking at Lonnie, he realized that he was not alone. They spent the night by the river, huddled together to keep warm. Caleb felt his horror and anger recede, and a new feeling was born in his soul. A feeling of catastrophe that led to catharsis. He had lost everything, but he had found something much more valuable. Lonnie, her trust, her love. He realized that his life was not meaningless. He was born to save her, to find his meaning in her. At dawn they continued their journey. They walked, because Bullet got scared of the fire and ran away. But they didn't give up. They walked through the desert, overcoming all difficulties. Caleb was wounded, but he didn't complain. He knew that he had to reach Lonnie's tribe. He had to bring her home. After a few days they reached the Comanche camp. Chief White Bear, her father, was happy to see her alive. He was a wise and just man. He saw Caleb's wound and ordered his men to help him. He also saw in the eyes of Lonnie and Caleb something that he could not explain. It was love. The chief approached Caleb. "You saved my daughter," "White man, you are worthy of the greatest reward. You can take anything you want. Gold, cattle, land." Caleb shook his head. "I don't want anything. I just wanted to bring her home." "Then tell me what you want," the chief said. Caleb looked at Lonnie. She was looking at him, and there was hope in her eyes. "I want only one thing. I want to be with her. I want to marry her." The chief smiled. He saw that Caleb was an honest and brave man. "You are worthy of my daughter. I give you my blessing. You are now one of us." Caleb and Lonnie got married that same day. They lived in Lonnie's tribe, and Caleb became her husband. He was no longer a loner. He was part of something bigger. He was happy. Conclusion and lesson. This story, which took place in the Wild West of the 1880s, carries a deep and eternal lesson that is relevant in the modern world. Lonnie, tied to the rails, symbolizes a person who is on the verge of a catastrophe due to someone else's greed and indifference. In our lives, the rails can be debts, cruel bosses, loneliness, or even social pressure. We often feel helpless when we face problems that seem insurmountable. Caleb, who saves Lonnie, is a symbol of kindness and compassion that can be found in the most unexpected places. He is someone who is ready to help without expecting anything in return. And this is the most important thing we can learn from this story. In a modern world full of selfishness and cynicism, we often forget the importance of helping each other. We pass by a person who needs our help, thinking that it is not our business. But this story teaches us that kindness and compassion can change not only another person's life, but also our own. Lonnie, in turn, represents the strength of spirit. She does not give up, even when it seems that everything is lost. Her phrase, "Save me from these rails, and I will be yours forever," is not just a plea, but a vow, a promise that she is ready to keep. In the modern world, we often give up at the first difficulties. But this story teaches us that if we fight, we can overcome all difficulties. Thus, this story is not just a tale of love and adventure. It is a parable about the fact that kindness, courage, and strength of spirit are always rewarded, and that in the darkest place, where, it would seem, there is no hope, there is always a chance for salvation. You just need to believe in yourself and in the fact that good always triumphs over evil.